Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Another Glorious Read. I am your host, Aspen M. Sage. Let's get into it. First off, yesterday it was rainy, it was cold, it was raw. Today it is sunny and beautiful. That's what it's like to live in my little state in New England. I live in New Hampshire. If you don't know where that is, it's that little state in between Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts. Everybody knows Boston, Mass. We are just above them. We are known for the White Mountains, the Kangamangas Highway, and Lake Winnipesaukee. We are just that little state that goes by the slogan, live free or die. Gives you a cozy feeling, doesn't it? So here on Another Glorious Read, we are going to talk about books. And yes, I love curling up with a nice book and a nice hot cup of coffee. It is just a perfect time and the perfect day. But since it is getting into fall and next month is October, it is spooky season. I'm excited. I like spooky season. And also that means also fair season and farmer markets are also coming to an end. And that does not make me so happy, but it is what it is. But fall is amazing and it's cozy. And you know what goes with cozy? Maybe a warm drink, some blankets, everybody's favorite snacks, a little comfort area, a little nest of your own. Or I'm guessing a good book. I got your attention now. So this podcast is simply about reading books and my personal views and reviews on books I have read, and hopefully to add to your collection. We all are guilty of adding books to our stack that may never be read, even though we go to the bookstore, or as I like to call them, book adoption centers. But first, I'm guessing you want to learn a little about your host. I am a indie author, and I am also a craftsman. I like to work with my hands and create things. It could be painting, it could be leatherwork, it could be jewelry. It does not matter to me. I want to learn different things. I want to keep things tradition. I'm also a small farmer. I do have some livestock that I adore dearly. I am also a wife and a mother of a feral child. Yes, feral as in they're constantly running around barefooted and I don't know where their shoes are. But, that's part of being a mom, I guess. I'm also a small home business starting out. I do try to sell the stuff I do make, and eventually I will get there, but right now that is not a big deal. I'm also a big daydreamer, unfortunately, and I also like to think and imagine, and I create scenarios in my head, and that is why I started writing stories. As an indie author, I love to give life to these characters and scenes that come to life in my head. And I love it seeing other authors' works doing the same thing as I do. And just people who create music and art and the fan base and the cosplayers that came together and make this art come to life is amazing. And I wouldn't want to change it. And honestly, thinking back, this is now just new, or at least to me, because growing up, I always struggled to read and want to read because I had the dyslexia and learning disability. But now I'm a big reader. I read almost every night so I don't doom scroll, and we're all guilty of doing that. I do like the shifters. I do like paranormal romance, the dark romance, the fantasy books, the adventure. I am a sucker for it. I have always have been. And I now write paranormal romance myself as a new author. I do have two books published, but they are not currently up to my snuff. I literally, as a new author, made some mistakes that I am trying to fix by making second editions. But that is an episode for a different time. But as we go along, you will hear me give ratings and spice level ratings to different books. One being, I wish there was more, but the book's okay. And five being, oh my, you're making me blush. I feel warm. I gotta take a breather and walk away. But the same goes for regular reading. I will give one being like, there's more I wish from the story, or five, like, I would not change anything from this at all. I do like to read these books and get sucked into it, and we're all guilty of it. I have lately been reading different series that made me go, oh wow, I can't stop. What's the next book like? Or what's the next book like? But recent years, I found that the book community has grown, and that does do good for me. I like that. And it makes me feel good, especially with all these events going on. People putting balls on and tea parties and living these characters' lives. And it makes me feel good because we do need fantasy to live. We do need to escape from reality. And we've been doing this for centuries, if we actually think back about it, because we used to sit around the bonfires, in our old tribes, in all our old kingdoms and stuff. And there was always a storyteller. There would be telling of myths and legends and heroes and victories and villains and conquerors. We've learned so many stories over the years that just these people have now expanded it. I mean, we grew up, I grew up with the Harry Potter series. And then, there was the Shakespeare, there was Stephen King. There's so many beautiful and big authors out there. And now that we have a bunch of little authors, being the indie authors like myself, coming out, it's just good to see it expand and put all these different stories, and it's never ending. Like, there's always new ideas coming out and different personalities, and you can't write the same story. So, on another glorious read, we are aiming for kind of like a comfort, no judgmental zone book club. So basically, I'm rambling, you're listening, and we're just looking for a cozy, comfortable vibe. We are not here to make everything perfect. I'm sorry if you are looking for that professionalism. That is not me. I will give you what I think. I will say things, and I will even mispronounce things sometimes, and I do apologize ahead of time. So recently, when I got back into reading, I did end up purchasing a Kindle, and I do read that Kindle quite often, but I do also enjoy paperback. So one of the first books I got back into reading after listening to audiobooks at work while I worked at a factory, because it was the easiest thing for me to get lost while working with my hands, because I was like a machine. I just literally just put this part in, put this part in. I didn't even have to think about it. But the stories were able to let me go to a different place while making these parts. And it was easy because most of the time the machines did it anyway. So as I was reading and listening to stories, I kept thinking, oh wow, I gotta think about, different things. And I got my imagination going, and I was like, I'm gonna write a book. And then I pitched it to my friends or my coworkers too, and they loved it. And they're like, "Are you sure it's a movie that you've watched?" And I'm like, "No, it's not a movie. It's just how I see it and how I describe it." But as I go on, I am gonna tell you about certain characters that I like and who's my favorite and who I think needs more work. And I'm gonna tell you if I see any plot holes, not looking for faults in any of the books, but sometimes I'll be like, wait a minute, this doesn't count for where my mind's going. Like, what about this character? Or what about this situation? What happened to this part? And I want to share that with you guys. The first book I want to talk about that I recently read was The War God's Favorite by Jenny Fox. I give this book a solid 4 to 4.5 rating. Spice level is a 3 to 5. There was a lot, and I mean a lot of spice. It seems like every chapter or so they were entwined with each other. There was points where I was like, "Damn, they're at it again," and it was beautifully done. The main character or female lead, Cassandra, she was basically taken from her home at a young age and became a slave, and her only thought was to survive until she found her sister. Well, she ended up going to the Imperial Palace, and that's when her world got turned upside down. So when I imagine this book, I imagine kind of like a dynasty mixed with like the Roman Empire. So there are dragon princes who are dragon tamers who are basically born with these dragons. And Cassandra finds herself in a coliseum like with these dragons along with other slaves to be slaughtered. And this black dragon named Cry, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, is very interested in her. He's very calm. But he's like very interested in the slave. She doesn't run or anything. She just assumes the dragon's gonna end her life and she accepts it. But it kind of surprises her when the dragon actually protects her. Well, this gets his handler's attention. His he is the fourth prince who is also the war god, and he is not sure why his dragon has clung to this woman since he has no interest in women due to something that happened in his past. Kieran is a very silent type. He's very scary. No many people want to cross him because he is the war god and he does think with his sword more than he does his mind. So he and his dragon kind of have this communication going on silently where the dragon lifts Cassandra up and brings her to his feet. Now she thinks the prince is going to end her because his dragon wouldn't. But it kind of surprises her when he grabs her and sits her beside him. And his brothers are teasing him for taking pity on a slave instead of seeing the bloodshed. Um, and she's confused until she starts feeling his fingertips on the back of her neck. She doesn't know what to do. Instead of watching more of the games or this arena of bloodshed and stuff, the prince grabs her and basically walks away. He doesn't want to watch any more of the events. And he basically becomes enthralled with this woman. And she's gone from, like, I don't know what's going on to, okay, I guess I serve the prince now, to I have no idea where my life is going. So as the story progresses, he becomes very, very attached to her. He is definitely the character that falls hard. To the point where he's like, I'm going to get you out of slavery. I'm going to make you my concubine. You are going to be my wife. And she's just like, hold on. The only reason why I'm still around is to find my little sister, who she found out later on works in the Red District, what is a pleasure zone where people pay to do that. And they guess that her little sister is a Spitfire. It kind of reminds me of his sister, because there are like 6 or 7 dragon princes and like 12 to 20 princesses, but his actual sister that came from his mother is she's a Spitfire. She lives also by the sword, where she is very vulgar, and she's actually one of my favorite characters because she is that one that's like, you talk back to me, you're going to end up on the floor, or, oh, did I hurt your feelings? I don't give a shit. So she's very funny, and I like her. Now, the prince's mother is another story because now Cassandra now sees where both of the prince and the princess get their boisterous and I don't give a crap about you feelings, because his mother is the same way. She got to the point where she actually stole a dragon egg and they had to go receive it because it was important, and the mother said, it's sad that I have to steal the child's egg for you to come visit me. And it just turns into this whole like fiasco, and the emperor is amused, like she's his favorite, but she's like, you have other women, you don't need me. And he's like, oh, but you're my love. But Cassandra grows through the story. She becomes like from slave to concubine to royal concubine to the royal physician. So because of her medical history from her tribe. And she's able to make like scare people a little bit, and she just basically turns this whole empire upside down in this royal family, to the point where some of the princes and the princesses want her gone. And of course, standing in their way is the war god himself. But as the story goes on, it gets weird for me near the end, because there's this whole battle that pursues, and like she is really harmed to the point that I'm pretty sure she was dead, and then all of a sudden she's not dead. Like, it is so weird by the end of the book. And then the author did a very nice job playing at the end, where she's talking about the next book. I have not read the next book yet, but it sounds good, and I will get there. And I'm really hoping that it's as good as the first one. I really do. All right, the next series I want to talk about is actually done by another Fox author. This is Jasmine Fox's Precious Omega series. So the first book is mating their Omega with 4 alphas who find this runaway Omega basically freezing to death. So the Omega's name is Mila. And Mila is meant to be bred by this rogue shifter. Like, he's waiting for her to go to heat, and she basically runs for her life. And she's found by a couple of alphas in a different territory, Bowen, Silas, Theron, and Gentry. And they find themselves really attached to this Omega. And basically, they find out she goes into heat. They ask her if they want to be the ones to help her through it. And she says yes. And they find out they're basically fated mates in a way. So, how this author does it is very unique. She makes it so there's a group of alphas and betas, males, and they get one female or so. And it's funny because it's like, oh, it's a reverse harem situation. But it's done tastefully, in my opinion. But what gets me is I thought I was reading the books backwards, but it's not. It's just how the author wrote it, and she did a beautiful job doing it. She basically wrote the end of the series as the first book, and I'm kind of really glad she did because if not, I was going to be mad because of how the books played out. Like, I was like, oh my God, if this doesn't go the way I hope it does, I am just going to flip. Um, so basically, in this story, there's a council and these councils are basically trafficking Omegas. Like they're taking them from their homes at 6 years old of age and keeping them until they're ready to be bred. And they are literally finding these women to make sure they give birth to other Omegas so that they can traffic those children too. And it's not right. And the alphas are starting to find out that it's not. And they're like, this shouldn't be happening at all, and we need to put a stop to it. So there's different like levels of packs. There's the packs that are like these alphas who are supposed to be supported by the council, like they're the safe packs to be in. And then there's like the rogue packs or the rogue wolves, and then there's the packs in between. They're like there used to be an old way of doing it, but you guys turned our back on us when you decided to go with the council. And now they're all realizing that this is not how they should be living. They're supposed to find their fated mates, and that's how it's supposed to be. That due to the moon goddess, that's how she wants it to be. So this whole thing goes on, and the alpha that originally wanted Mila comes calling, and this whole battle ensues, and it just turns like really bad. I give this book a solid 4.5. Spice level, I give it a 4. There was some spice levels that made me blush, but not enough to make me go, oh, I gotta put this down. Or keep reading. So, there was good ones. I have to say, probably my favorite character out of that would be Theron, because he's kind of that grumpy alpha, but he's the most tender. Like, he's very sweet. Like, at first, he's, like, very suspicious of her, why she ran away, why is she in their territory. But he's like, I will give my life for you. It's the same with Gentry. I mean, all the alphas would, but like Gentry was right there too, but Theron was my favorite. So the next book is Hunting Their Omegas, and it's supposed to be the alpha's alpha. It's basically the main alpha who runs all these other little alpha packs. So this one's more a little twisted. It's like the beginning of the book series, if I want to say that right. Basically, it's like the first book was the ending, and then the first one is basically how it started. So the second book actually involves Wynn, Eldrick, and Bishop, and they had Isolde. I hope I said that right. I'm sorry if I didn't. She is basically part of this hunting game made by the council for a bunch of Omegas to be released into this wooded, caged area. And then they let out all these alpha groups to go find them. Well, basically, these alphas are supposed to claim an Omega in front of a councilman member. And most of this one Omega is like, no, my only job is to find my little sister and get the hell out of Dodge. But she figures out that these alphas, after they capture her and she goes into heat, basically, and they claim her to basically help her in this situation. And they basically want to start to see the flaws in the council's way of doing things. And they're constantly on this girl about, oh, why aren't you pregnant yet? Where's your pup? Oh, you're telling me that you don't have an Omega pup yet? And they're starting to get witches involved, and I guess werewolves and witches aren't supposed to get involved together. They don't like each other in these books. So these alphas are starting to say, well, if the council's going to go behind our back and use magic, so are we. But they're involved with the dark witches, and we're going to go with the light witches. And they find out that one of the witches that they are using is actually a very kind. She is okay with werewolves, and she's got a few other witch friends that are okay with being with werewolves and, being cool with that. I have to say, Elric is my favorite in this book. He's very stoic in a way, but he's not. He's very calm. And he's also constantly like reminding Wynne, hey, you gotta calm down. I know you're mad, but we can't be doing that. Again, I give that book a solid 4.5. The same with the same Spice. Definitely a 4. Wish there was more, but it's good. It's really good read. The next one is Protecting Their Omega. And this is basically Isolati's sister, Briella, sorry. And her alphas are Ezra, Corin, and Valor. And definitely Corin and maybe a little Ezra are my favorites in these books. Ezra is definitely that strong silent type that doesn't take in. Corin is a doctor that has a really twisted past going on, I think. If I read it right, he's got tattoos covering his bodies to basically cover his scars. So basically, after you read book number 2, then you realize and then you read book number 3, and then you go back to book number 1, you realize how everything plays out. And it's done very beautifully. Jasmine Fox did a really awesome job. And I would not change anything about these books. I have not found any plot holes. But there was times where I'm like, I want to reach through this book and strangle the old freaking council member that's like literally pushing buttons and boundaries. And I'm like, some alpha, please tear out his throat. So those are the two books or a book and a series I'm going to talk about for today. I am going to end the episode. I am going to try to post at least once a week. And I do hope that you're going to keep joining me and that we're going to grow. And sometimes I will give you a series on an episode. Sometimes I'll talk about a single book. Sometimes I might talk about little nitpicks I'm writing. Or sometimes I'm going to tell you about a book I am reading. Like right now, I'm reading a dark romance. At first, I was like, I don't know how to feel about this. I'm very conflicted. And now that I'm getting towards the end of the book, I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense. So thank you guys for listening in. I do hope you have a wonderful day and manifest whatever you are hoping for and that you keep on smiling. Thank you for listening, and I am out. Bye-bye.